What's going on, guys? It's Bromley at Empire Barbell, and today we're going to talk about the anterior pelvic tilt, how it can affect your posture and bracing, and how it can hinder your ability to put up a good performance and stay safe long term. So real quick, if you haven't already, go ahead and click the link to our t-shirt store. Our merch store is live. We have a few logos up that you can get on shirts, phone cases, coffee mugs, whatever you like. We have our gym logo, but in addition, we have our new Gym Dog brand. So for those of you that like lifting and like dogs, go ahead and check it out. Just give me some feedback. Let me know what you think, even if you're not interested in buying anything. As always, I appreciate everybody's support and feedback. So the anterior pelvic tilt is when the pelvis drops forward in the front and creates this arch in the lower back, okay? This is a posture that's common in a lot of athletes, and it creates quite a bit of problems. So to start with the basics of bracing, we always use either the guy wire analogy, or I actually like the can of biscuits analogy, where the spine, the way it's braced, you have all these vertebrae that are stacked on top of each other. The muscles in your trunk provide equal and opposite tension to keep your spine rigid, to keep it safe so it doesn't crumble and collapse over onto itself. So the abdominals, the obliques, the erectors, they all should work isometrically, and the way they pull creates compression and stability. When things are not lined up properly, your ability to create adequate amount of pressure while keeping your spine safe goes away. So if we have this dented can analogy where all of a sudden our abdominals are open up, that arch in our lower back gets increased, our diaphragm points away from our pelvic floor, this is not very stable. It's not only how our spine is not really meant to bear a load, but it really compromises our ability to create tension in the midsection. So we end up leaking a lot of strength throughout this crease right here that becomes created. So with bracing, with best practices as far as getting as tight as possible, staying as safe as possible, we know that diaphragm stacked directly over the pelvic floor, that's ideal. That's where you're going to be the tightest and you're going to perform the best. So that means the hips have to be neutral. An anterior pelvic tilt means the hips, the front of the hips are pointed down, the back of the hips are pointed up. Now this does a few things. So just as far as the hips are concerned, so we already have the diaphragm and pelvic floor pointing away from each other, but we also have key movers, key muscles that are vital for optimal performance being elongated. Remember, a more contracted muscle is a stronger muscle. When a muscle is really stretched out, it's not quite as strong. So when possible, we like to start with the muscles short. So right here, the abdominals are stretched out. Now that's a pretty important piece of the chain. When the abdominals are weak or they're in a weak position, you're gonna leak a lot of strength. So that's one. Two, the glutes and the hammies are stretched. So if you don't believe me, stand in front of a mirror and I want you to lock your knees and I want you to arch your lower back, okay, as hard as you can, and stick your butt back. And from there, I want you to try and tip forward and see how far you get. You're gonna immediately feel that stretch right in your hamstrings and your glutes. So we are starting out with, whether you're squatting, deadlifting, even if you're pressing, key muscles are being started in a very weakened position because they're elongated. Then we have the spine compromised, we have the abdominals opened up, and on top of that, we have this pinch point right here. For those of you that get back pumps when you deadlift, even when you do standing overhead presses, if your back is arched, that means as you drop into a squat, you're likely to come around in a butt wink. That means your erectors are being stretched and contracted. That stretch shortening cycle, that's how you get a back pump, because these muscles that should be working isometrically are now being pumped up like a bicep during a curl. So in this kind of Goofus and Gallant comparison, we have Gallant over here who has his diaphragm stacked directly on top of the pelvic floor. That means you're gonna optimize that circumferential stability so that as the obliques pull against each other, as the abdominals contract against the erectors, it's like if any of you have tried to crush an egg with your hands, just hold an egg and crush. For as fragile as eggs are, it's very hard to do. And the reason is that pressure gets distributed around the egg. So each piece reinforces the other and it comes back to the starting point and it creates a very, very stable conformation. So that's what we want. We want that stability, things stacked on top of each other. So the spine is aligned the way that it's supposed to be. We have equal and opposite pressure from the front and the back, so the erectors aren't taking over. The abdominals are stronger. That's huge. That means you're going to be able to brace harder. It means you're going to be able to sustain more weight in the first place. It means you're also less likely to get out of position as you fatigue during a set or during a maximal attempt. If you're the type of person whose back rounds like an angry cat when you're in the middle of a deadlift, or if you're the type of person whose shoulders dump on a heavy squat, you are going to benefit from learning how to find that posture, stacking the ribs down. That's the cue. You want the abdominals short. Remember that. Good bracing practices, it's almost like doing a standing crunch. So if you're standing up and I'm in this arch position, I need to squeeze my glutes. Okay, we're shortening the glutes and bringing the hips back under. So you should see that arch in the lower back soften. We're also bringing the ribs down. I like to think of it like snapping a suitcase with the latches. So in my ribs, if I have those latches like on a briefcase, I latch them down and that drives my ribs straight down into my pelvic floor, and I can feel my abs are shortened and tight. I have a lot of pressure alleviated off of my lower back. I can feel that my glutes are tight, so they're in a good starting position to be very explosive at the start of a deadlift or very tight at the bottom of a squat. And when I maintain that position on an all-out effort, I always get a better result. Now here's the thing, getting to that position where you can execute this with all that pressure distributed right, your spine in a good position, you got your glutes and hammies are short and tight, which means they're going to perform better. Getting to that position takes a lot of practice. It is not something you're going to get the first time, and it's certainly not something I recommend you trying to do on a maximal effort attempt. This is where a lot of personal time is going to be warranted. You need to stand in front of a mirror. You need to get comfortable with picking yourself apart. How do you stand? How does it feel to stand perfectly upright, to keep the glutes tight, to keep the ribs down? Is it hard to keep your abs tense in that position and then breathe? The abs should be your belt. They should be restricting airflow as the diaphragm drops, and you should feel that come back up in your ribs. For many of you, it's very, very uncomfortable. But when you do it right, you get good at it, your stability increases exponentially and you will stay safer. You will be able to deadlift with reckless abandon without destroying your back or without having these disc issues that plague so many lifters. This should augment your life. It should make you more useful, and you're not going to be more useful if you're beaten into the ground, okay? So remember, if you're not staying in one piece, you're not going to be around long enough to get strong in the first place. You got to stay in one piece. So I have a lot of videos on this as it is. I don't expect everybody to go through all 100 videos I have posted so far, but I do have a couple specifically on the anterior pelvic tilt. I have a couple on bracing, but I just want this as a refresher to remind you guys, do your bracing work. Look up the McGill 3. It's not just sit-ups and leg raises. It's learning how to maintain this position and then progress to be able to hold it longer, then be able to hold it under a load, and then be able to breathe. And then eventually you do it with a barbell and it kind of makes sense. And then before you know it, you're clipping away max effort reps with this just solid foundational bracing technique. And you're gonna find that you're just gonna be around longer, you're gonna perform better, okay? This thing applies to me specifically because in my early years, I did so many dumb things as a teenager. I have a ton of back issues. I always thought preventing my back from rounding meant doing the opposite, meant arching. And you see this a lot. You see it with women, you see it with a lot of smaller male athletes, people who tend to have more flexibility. They'll arch into the bar, and that creates a big problem because you're feeding into this dysfunction. Well, I spent years trying to fix my shitty deadlift by arching into my deadlift. And what it created was this complete lack of mobility in my lumbar spine. So my lower back is fused into this position because I tried arching. So now I have a really bad anterior pelvic tilt unless I try really hard to fix it. This epiphany came once I became aware of this movement dysfunction, and I went into a deadlift and I counterintuitively tried to start with my glutes tight, my hips under, and my ribs down. And I remember shaking as I was trying to maintain that position to get to the bar because it was such a foreign alignment. The coordination just was not there yet. And it took a long time before that was a natural movement. And I remember the feeling of getting my hands into the bar, of feeling no pressure on my lower back. And I remember the feeling in my glutes of hamstrings as I rooted into the ground and I found the handle, that start position where like, this is how I'm gonna drive to break that bar. And I was so much stronger and so much more efficient. So it's important, even if you have to take a few steps back to take those steps forward, it's important you guys do this foundational work before you start getting ahead of yourself and chasing big numbers, okay? It is crucial to your success. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of questions, guys. Go ahead and leave it in the comment box or leave it on the forum. Thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Bromley at Empire Barbell. I'll see you.